Hi guys, my name is Sharon and this is my first ever YouTube video. I thought I'd start my first ever video by doing a January reading wrap up. I read 18 books last month. Really quick intro, I read a mix of all genres, majority thriller but also a lot of romance, historical fiction, general and lit fic, romantasy sometimes, non-fiction and memoirs. I guess for a bit of a slightly longer intro, hopefully editing me will know how to put in chapters so you can jump ahead. But I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel. I got back into reading in 2019 and I've been a silent watcher on BookTube for years and years. But you know, it's a scary thing putting yourself out on the internet. Nothing makes me cringe more than hearing my own voice and seeing my face on a screen. And now I have like this one-eyed situation going on, so it's even worse. But life is kind of lonely sometimes, so I don't know why I didn't integrate myself into the BookTube community sooner. It's like my favourite corner of the internet, and I thought it's New Year, if I'm not going to do it now then I never will. I'm on TikTok as well, but I feel so pressured on there to try to cut my videos down to as short as possible, and I'm more of a long-winded rambler anyway. So here I am, now on to the books. The first book I read in January was Wild by Kristin. This is also called Magic Hour in the US. I don't know why there are different titles. I think Wild is more fitting. This story follows two estranged sisters, Ellie and Julia. Ellie is a policewoman who one day finds a little girl abandoned in the forest. This girl is about 6 years old and she's with a wolf pup. She acts very feral and wild and she can't talk either, so Ellie calls upon her sister Julia, who is a child psychiatrist, and she asks Julia to come back to their hometown to help rehabilitate this child. And since this little girl can't talk, they can't get any information out of her. She walks on all fours, she eats like an animal, and she clearly has a lot of trauma. So they're trying to help her, but they also want to find out who her real parents are and why she was abandoned. Kristin is one of my favourite authors. She's such a good storyteller. She really knows how to make you feel for the characters. I'm a crier, so I did shed a tear or two. Kristin also really good with writing about relationships, family issues, and this was a 5-star read for me. I loved the ending, and I think this has cemented itself as one of my favourite Kristin books as well. The second book I read was Heart the Lover by Lily King. This was nominated in last year's Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Fiction. This is a quite short book. It's lit fic. We follow an unnamed female main character through college and also later in life. I didn't really connect with the writing or the story, but I think I'm in the minority because everyone I've seen review this book really loves it. But I think this was just a little short for me. I think I prefer a longer story. And I know this book has a link to her previous book she's written called Writers and Lovers, so I don't know if I should have read that first. The third book I read was The Girls Who Grew Big by Leila Mottley. This was also nominated in last year's Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Fiction. Here the story follows 3 teenage girls who are pregnant/young mothers and their trials and tribulations. They're all going through something a little different, whether that be financial struggles, social judgment, difficulty in reaching their dreams and goals, relationship issues in both romance and family life. There was also a plot twist thrown in here. I love plot twists and I love thrillers, but I also love a plot twist when it's not in a thriller because it's just unexpected and it adds a little something to the story. I really liked this one and I recommend if you like the found family trope. I've only read 2 Leila Mottley books, but so far I've given both 5 stars. Then I read The Night She Vanished by Wendy Dranfield. This is a thriller. You have Nicole, who's estranged from her family and she's moved out of her hometown and leads a very different life now. But when her younger sister vanishes, she has no choice but to go back to her hometown to face her parents again. She starts to investigate her sister's disappearance, but her parents seem quite suspicious and they're pretty blasé about it. This has really sleepy town vibes. It was quite slow burn, but not to the point where I wasn't interested. It was a solid thriller and I liked the suspenseful build up to all the plot twists at the end. And I also like a good underrated book. I am trying to read from more underrated authors this year. Then I read a non-fiction called Story of a Murder, The Wives, the Mistress and Dr. Crippen by Hallie Rubenhold. Hallie Rubenhold is a social historian and she wrote this book called The Five, which is the untold stories of the women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. And maybe it's kind of morbid of me, but it's one of my favourite books because it's just so interesting. I love reading about the Victorian times. And not that I necessarily like reading about misogyny, but it's so interesting to read about how women were treated back then. It's infuriating, really. This book is set in the late 1800s, so also in the Victorian era. You follow Dr. Crippen, who is less of a doctor and more of a scammer. Basically, anytime he wants to get rid of a wife, he just unalives them. This is a quite long one. I don't think I loved this as much as I did with The Five, but it was still good nonetheless. And it's fascinating to also read about how they used to catch murderers back then. Then I read Rumoured by Kelly and Kristina Mancaruso. This is a mixed media mystery. Here you follow Naomi, who is a reporter working for a celebrity magazine. You have a fictional pop star called Harlow Hayes, who has been accused of unaliving a fellow celebrity. And Naomi, the reporter, decides she will investigate this case. She is haunted by her own traumatic past, so she kind of becomes obsessed with trying to solve this case. And this pop star Harlow Hayes is so Taylor Swift coded. She has a single called James Dean, her album's called Red, White and Blue, and she's signed to a label called Machinist Records. This was a really fun one. There were news reports, social media posts, song lyrics, and honestly I thought the song lyrics were pretty good. I can picture them being in a Taylor Swift song. The plot twist was pretty far-fetched, but if you're into pop culture and you know all these celebrity conspiracy theories, I think you will eat this up. I had a good time with this one. Then I read Welcome to the Family by Cathryn Grant, another thriller. Here you have the female main character who is going to her fiance's family home / vineyard to meet his family for the first time. Her fiance is from a really rich background. I mean, they own a vineyard. But when she meets the mother-in-law, it's very apparent that her mother-in-law doesn't like her. She's really rude and hostile. And when she tries to tell her fiancé this, he basically dismisses her. I spent most of the book being infuriated. There was so much gaslighting in here. I thought the pacing of this was a little slow. Like, the first half of the book was pretty much just a lot of gaslighting, but when it got to the halfway mark, it did take a turn, which I wasn't expecting. It was an okay thriller, but I felt like it was just a little too long, and the plot twist didn't really blow me away. My next read after this was Calling Me Home by Julie Kibler. This was a heartbreaking story, but also heartwarming. You follow two different women, Isabella, who's an older white woman, and then Dory, who's a younger black woman who's also a single mum. I'm really bad at remembering places in America which aren't New York City. Basically, Isabella and Dory live in this one town somewhere in America and need to go somewhere else that's really far away. Isabel needs to make this trip for a funeral, so she asks Dory for help to drive her to this place. Dory has issues of her own at home that she needs to be dealing with, but she decides to drop everything to help Isabel out. On this road trip, Isabel opens up to Dory about her past, and she starts telling her the story of her first love. When Isabel was a teenager, she was in love with a young black boy, and this was a forbidden love because of the times. I think this was back in the 1920s, so as you can imagine, the racism and discrimination back then was really awful. I mean, not that it's great these days either, but this is a really heartbreaking and emotional story. There's quite a lot going on with the different plot lines, but I really liked this one. I really loved our two main characters and their friendship. This was definitely one of my favourites of the month. I then read another non-fiction called Disney High, The Untold Story of the Rise and Fall of Disney Channel's Tween Empire by Ashley Spencer. I love my pop culture. I didn't have the Disney Channel growing up, but I remember going to my friends' houses to watch The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and also High School Musical. I also was a big fan of Hilary Duff, and this book pretty much covers all the really big Disney stars like Selena Gomez, Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, the Jonas Brothers, Hilary Duff, Brenda Sol. There was a bit of tea in this, but I also found it really interesting how the Disney Channel started off and how it came to be. This is one definitely for the millennials and anyone into pop culture. Then I read All His Pretty Girls by Charly Cox. You follow a detective called Alyssa, and she's put on this case when a woman goes missing. You also follow the woman who goes missing. She gets kidnapped by this sick, twisted man. This book was also quite disturbing and violent. I used to think I didn't like detective stories or thrillers where you already know who the culprit is because I like the big shocking plot twists at the end, but actually I now realise that I like these types of thrillers as well. I like seeing someone being brought to justice, and there was still a very satisfying plot twist in this. This is the first book in the Detective Alyssa White series, but as I'm filming this now, I have already finished the second book, so I do want to continue with the series. I do really like the writing, the pacing. Then I read another thriller, You'll Never Know by Caleb Stevens. This is a really fast-paced popcorn thriller. You have a husband and a pregnant wife who go away on vacation, and then out of the blue, the wife gets kidnapped. Then the husband is sent on this wild goose chase, and he starts playing this twisted game where he has to solve clues to try and get his wife back. I will say I think this was very far-fetched, but I do feel like most popcorn thrillers are. Nearly everyone I saw review this gave this a 5 stars. I didn't love it as much as everyone else. It was fast-paced though, and it's good if you're trying to get out of a reading slump, but I might be in the minority when I say this wasn't one of my favourites. My next read after this was All Her Little Lies by Becca Day, another fast-paced popcorn thriller. The premise of this one is that the female main character has a teenage son, and her best friend's teenage daughter is dating her teenage son. But when she discovers that her best friend's daughter is dead, she suspects that her own son did it. Hopefully that made sense. I did enjoy this for the most part, but then it got to the plot twist, and then there was another one, and then it was just a bit too far-fetched for my liking. But overall, this was a good thriller. I enjoyed myself. I read a literary dystopian called Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. This is set in the future where the world has kind of been destroyed by smog and famine. You follow this unnamed character. She's a Chinese American chef, and she's kind of struggling, but she manages to get this job in this mountainous region that borders Italy. She starts working for this elite family, and basically this mountainous region is really secluded and luxurious, and it hasn't been affected by the smog. Here she kind of rediscovers her sensory pleasures for food, eating and cooking. There's also a bit of a sapphic relationship in here. Honestly, I don't think I'm smart enough to fully dissect the complicated layers of this book. There was a lot more to this story than just her cooking, but I did enjoy the food descriptions and the flowery writing. Then I read It's Different This Time by Joss Richards. This is a friends to lovers second chance romance where you follow the two characters, Adam and what's her name? You follow Adam and June. June is a struggling actress and Adam is a chef. They met in New York City when they became roommates. There are dual timelines, and basically they are called back together in present day when they randomly co-inherit their ex-landlord's home. This home is like a multi-million brownstone in West Village, but obviously there's fine print as well in them inheriting this. I felt the same way in this with how I feel about a lot of friends to lovers and second chance romances. Like, please get together already. But that feeling aside, I did enjoy this one. I liked the slow burn and I liked their chemistry, and I was rooting for them to get together. So I recommend if you want a nice romance read. Then I read Blind Not Broken, Your Guide to Turning Loss and Grief into Happiness by Lucy Edwards. If you don't know Lucy Edwards, she's like the OG blind influencer in the UK. You might have seen her in, I think, the L'Oreal hair adverts on TV. It's really interesting but also really sad to read about other people's vision loss journeys because everyone's journey is so different. Lucy talks about the 5 stages of grief. As someone going through vision loss as well, I feel like on my part I've mostly overcome this, but it's also a continuous journey as well. I feel like my younger teenage self would have really benefited from reading this. I think this is a really good one for anyone who's going through vision loss, like the early stages of being diagnosed. But I don't think this book is just for those who are visually impaired. I do think it's important for able-bodied people to learn about other disabilities and other people's experiences as well. Then I read My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney, which I feel like is the thriller of the moment. This story starts off with a woman who goes for a run in the morning, and then when she gets back home her keys don't fit in the lock. She knocks on the door and some random woman answers, claiming to be her, and even her own husband doesn't recognise her. But there's so much more to this story. There are multiple perspectives, and if you know Alice Feeney, you know she always writes really shocking plot twists. Honestly, I had no idea where this was going as well. Also quite far-fetched, but I did enjoy myself. I did like this one more than her last year's release, Beautiful Ugly, and in true Alice Feeney fashion, lots of unhinged characters and shocking plot twists. Then I read The Future Saints by Ashley Winstead. This is a contemporary fiction with some romance. This story centres around a rock band called The Future Saints. You follow this guy called Theo who basically has been brought in by the record label to manage the band. The frontwoman / lead singer of the band is Hannah, and she's dealing with loss and grief, and the band are basically facing a downward spiral. There's some really heavy subjects in here like substance addiction, grief, mental health struggles. This was a good story, but I feel like the author could have dived even deeper into these subject matters. The comp title was Daisy Jones and the Six, and Daisy Jones is one of my favourite books of all time, so I kept on comparing them in my head whilst I was reading. I don't think they're quite the same. I only just realised that Ashley Winstead is the author of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and she predominantly writes thriller books, so I think she has done a good job of jumping into a different genre. And finally, the last book of the month is The Rainfall Market by Yu Yong Kwang. This is a magical realism / fantasy story. You follow Sharon, who's this lonely schoolgirl, and she wins a ticket to the Rainfall Market. This is a temporary magical market which only pops up during the rainy season. There are loads of magical shops, and they have these orbs that basically represent an alternative life that you can swap your own life for. I really liked the concept of this. When I read the blurb, it was giving me the Midnight Library by Matt Haig vibes. The Midnight Library, however, was a lot more somber and heavy, and this one was quite cozy and whimsical. I wish I read this in the autumn time because I like cozier reads and fantasy in autumn. This is a quite short book, but I just wanted a little more from it because the concept was so interesting. I just wanted a little more. Actually, I lied. I read 19 books in January. I also read Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. You might know Jeanette McCurdy from her best-selling memoir, I'm Glad My Mum Died. I read that when it came out and it was such a good memoir. This one, however, is fictional. Half His Age is a coming-of-age story. You follow a 17-year-old teenage girl called Waldo who starts pursuing her much older teacher. It's not romanticised, and it's also not quite my dark Vanessa either. The tone of this book is really different. Waldo is clearly a very lonely girl and also quite erratic. There are complicated power dynamics in here, and she's clearly in the pursuit of control and validation. I have to say I don't really know how I felt about this one. Some of the scenes were so gross. I mean, a student-teacher relationship is gross anyway. There were multiple scenes, but one in particular where I was just reading it like, what am I reading? It was so disturbing, and I wish I could unsee it. I think this book is for a very specific type of reader, but maybe Waldo was doomed from the very start because her mother named her Waldo. I will say the writing was really sharp and witty. I think Jeanette McCurdy has a quite dark sense of humour, and I do think she's a very talented writer. And that concludes my monthly wrap up. Thank you if you've watched until the end, and I will see you in my next video.